You know those chalkboard signs you see sitting outside of pubs, restaurants, and coffee shops? Well, this is my version. Hi, I'm Leslie with Leslie's Cookies and Treats, and I made this chalkboard sign for a 30th birthday celebration. But decorating it didn't quite go as planned, so stay tuned and see what happened and how I fixed it. So if you're interested in making this chalkboard sign along with me, you can get the cookie cutter STL file on my website, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. And I'm just using a detail consistency royal icing here to outline the border of the chalkboard. So to make your straight lines, you're going to want to touch down with your icing and then lift your bag up a little bit and watch your line of icing as it's falling down. If you lift your bag up a little bit, your line will be much straighter than if you keep your piping bag right next to the cookie. And another little tip, if you squeeze out a little bit of icing out of your bag before you touch down, you will get a nice start to your line and you won't have that little icing bump at the start. So squeeze out a little bit of icing, touch down, lift your bag up and pull across with nice even pressure and you'll get a nice straight line. And now that my outline is done, I'm using a brown royal icing consistency that's about a 15-second flood. And I'm just going to fill in all of these areas that I already outlined. And then I'll use my scribe to shape these areas and to also make sure that the icing gets all the way down to the cookie so that I do not get a crater. And also I'm decorating a chocolate chip pretzel cookie here, and sometimes there's little divots where the chocolate chips are or the pretzel pieces. And so I'm also going to take my icing and kind of fill those in so that my icing does not fall into those gaps later and cause my flood icing to be bumpy. And these little areas are small. It's one of the reasons why I like to work with a 15-second royal icing, because this icing is a little bit stiffer. You do need to work with it to smooth it out with your scribe, but you have less chance of having a crater happen. And then I set my cookie in front of a fan to dry for about 15 minutes so that these crust over quickly. Now I'm just going to go back in and finish the outline of my chalkboard. I am keeping my piping bag close to the cookie here for the flood because I want to make sure that the icing gets all the way down to the cookie so it does not sink in the middle as it's drying. And then once again, I'll use my scribe to smooth it out and to make sure the icing is even and there's no air bubbles. And I've really sped up the video for this process. I know it's not fun watching me use my scribe, but like I've said before, it is probably your most important cookie decorating tool. And if you want a really smooth flood, you're going to want to use your scribe. And then I add a little more icing to this side so that it would be fuller. And then once again, I'm going to go back with my scribe and finish smoothing it out. And then I'm going to put this cookie back in front of a small table fan so it can crust over quickly so I do not get craters. And now that it's all dry, I'm going to come back in with my flood consistency black icing and fill in the chalkboard. And then look what happens. My bag got a hole in the seam. Luckily, most of the icing did not land on the cookie, and so I'm able to just wipe this part away. So I used a dampened paintbrush where I wiped off all of the water, and then I just took a spoonful of this icing and put it in the center because I don't want this chalkboard to crust over before I can finish it. So just let me get this filled in and then I'll clean up this mess and be right back with you. I did get a bad batch of piping bags, but they are being replaced, so not to worry. I use these piping bags all the time and they are my favorites, and this does not usually happen. So while my cookie was drying in front of a fan, I cleaned up the mess, and now I'm back with a new piping bag and my detail consistency black icing, and I'm just going to outline all of the pieces of this chalkboard again. So to do the outline, you want to go slow. You want to touch down and lift up your piping bag and follow along where the creases already are. If you do make a mistake, you can wipe it away with a dampened paintbrush. Just make sure that you don't put too much pressure so that you don't dent your cookie. Icing on the surface might be crusted over, but it's not completely dry. So go slow so that you can lay your icing down right in the creases and outline your cookie with the black icing. This is basically just the same process we did when we were outlining the cookie at the beginning, only now you want to make sure that your icing drops right in the creases. So make sure that you go slow and watch your line of icing and where it's falling and not your piping bag. And once you finish, set this cookie aside to dry completely. I let mine dry overnight. And then I went back in with my projector and I just wrote in the words that I wanted to put on this cookie. I used a projector to do this. Sometimes it's hard writing on black, so you might want to do it with a white edible marker or just with a paintbrush and some white food gel. But I use a projector, and I am just going to go over that now with my white food gel. And you don't need to thin down your white food color. It's fine just right out of the bottle. So just take a detail paintbrush and paint on your chalkboard design. Also would have been fun here to use some colors, but I'm just doing white today. And then I have a detailed consistency royal icing in yellow. I'm just going to outline my numbers here, and then I'll go back in and flood those in. And whenever I'm doing lettering, I like to do a practice run first on a paper towel or a piece of parchment. So you might want to do that as well before you take it to the cookie. You could also make these numbers like royal icing transfers, and then when they're dried, you could attach them to the cookie with a little bit of royal icing. And now that I've got my outline down, I'm just going to touch it up a little bit with my scribe, and then I'll go back in and fill in these little areas, making sure that I get the icing all the way down to the cookie. I am using a tip on my piping bag. I don't usually do that, but these are really skinny areas, and I want to make sure that the icing goes right in between those lines. I'm just going to settle the icing down with my scribe, and then I have a dampened paintbrush where I've wiped off all of the excess water, and I'm just going to push my line over a little bit to get this number the way I want it. And I think this cookie came out pretty cute, even though the piping bag exploded and we had a little bit of challenges along the way. But we made it, and cheers to 30 years. And if cookie decorating is your thing, please be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I have new tutorials all the time. See you soon.